Hey everyone, I'm Armor Gaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is Shallinar. After discovering she could communicate with fire instead of nature, Shallinar was repudiated by her tribe's elders. Even though no one from her family will even approach her, she uses her abilities to protect the forest from raging fires. As the description implies, she is a fire monster, therefore his weakness is water, and here we have her childhood form, her teenage form, and her adult form. And Shallinar really reminds me of Lao Mu, but just more like sinister looking. But anyways, let's get straight into the stats. Her power is 3,432, which when we're only talking about fire legendary monsters, it's really not that high. As of the time I'm recording this video, there are 18 fire legendary monsters, and this puts her in 12th place. However, that's not to say that her power is necessarily bad, because fire monsters, they're pretty much all attackers, and most of them tend to have a power of 3,500 and above. But this is still a really good power. In fact, it's only 44 points less than Barbato's power. Her speed is 27,747, which makes her tied for 9th place along with Darmith. Her speed is 3,465, which is actually rather odd for attackers because this is the speed that most deny monsters have. In fact, this makes her the fastest monster along with Darmith for fire legendary monsters. So to review her stats really quickly, her power, although it's in the low end when talking about only fire monsters, it's still a really good power. Her life is rather mediocre, and her speed is quite amazing for an attacker. And probably one of the best things about Shallinar is her trait, immune to stun. Most fire monsters tend to have immune to burning, while Shallinar breaks that cycle and instead it gives an immune to stun, which is an amazing trait to have. And now moving on to her default and special skills. She starts off with Bow Strike. Deals low physical damage to a single enemy, dealing 25 damage, 13 stamina with no cooldown. Firebolt deals low fire damage to a single enemy for 30 damage, costing 13 stamina with no cooldown. Like usual, there's nothing special about these skills, so let's move on to the special skill. Infernal Stampede deals massive fire damage to all enemies, may burn all targets, so it's an AoE dealing 70 damage that has the potential to burn. This is an amazing skill considering this monster is an attacker, and later on she has a skill that actually gives her double damage and an extra turn. So if you ever find yourself having Infernal Stampede, and you still haven't used that skill, you can give yourself double damage and extra turn and use Infernal Stampede to pretty much win the game. Although this skill could have been significantly improved if it was special damage instead of fire damage, it's still a really good special. And now moving on to skills group 1, we have a skill called Impact Flint. Deals moderate special damage, 50% chance of burning target to a single enemy, dealing 35 damage, costing 26 stamina with no cooldown. So 50% chance to burn, you guys know how I feel about this, this skill is not worth running. Next we have Wildfire, deals moderate fire damage, target becomes weak to fire attacks, requires cooldown. So it targets a single enemy with 35 damage, costing 28 stamina, having a 1 turn cooldown, and it applies Sticky Lava, which basically makes your fire attacks 80% stronger. Now I actually don't have anything really bad to say about this skill. It actually could work because you can use this skill to set up for a future skill, but she has better skills than skills group 2 and 3, so you won't be needing Wildfire. And lastly in skills group 1 we have Blazing Sparks, may burn target. So this skill doesn't deal any damage, it costs 25 stamina and has no cooldown, and all it does is burn. This is a pretty odd skill, and I have no idea why you would want to run this skill, so you can completely disregard everything from skills group 1. So that moves us down to skills group 2, and we start off with an attack called Flaming Tackle. Deals moderate special damage, may burn target, so you attack a single enemy with 45 damage costing 28 stamina, and you have no cooldown. So this skill I like and I dislike at the same time. I like that this skill is special based as opposed to fire based, meaning that in Team Wars this skill can be used against the enemy fire monster without giving up any damage output. And I also like that it has 0 cooldown, meaning if it's ever like fire metal and you go up against an enemy Timerion who does cooldowns activated, you'll still have an attack to use. However, I don't really like the 45 damage output, but at the same time if you have high enough level runes and the fact that she has a self buff skill, that might be all you need to take out the enemy fire monster or really any other enemy as long as they don't have any life runes. So this is potentially a skill you might want to consider running. Moving on we have Burning Corruption. May burn all targets, targets become weak to fire attacks, requires cooldown. It's an AoE that deals no damage, it costs 26 stamina and it has a 3 turn cooldown. So the purpose of Burning Corruption is to set up for a future AoE skill with Sticky Lava. Your fire attacks will be 80% more effective. So even if you go up against a fire monster, as long as you land Sticky Lava on them, your fire attacks will be more powerful. At the same time, you'll land Burning on them, which will make them lose 45% of their full life in the course of 3 turns. So I like Burning Corruption because it sets up for a future attack, but that's also the same reason I dislike Burning Corruption. My number one gripe with monsters that have self buff skills, monsters that have a self double damage boost, is that it takes 1 turn to set up. So even if you have a deny monster in your team, most deny monsters can only deny for 1 turn. Take for example General Thetis. As soon as General Thetis does Stamina Devours, all of the enemies will recharge, and if you're using your attacker to set up for a future attack, Once it goes up to General Thetis' turn, she has to recharge, and then the enemy will be free to attack you. So for that reason, you might or might not want to consider running Burning Corruption. I imagine that most people will be running Burning Corruption just because you see the potential in doing an AoE Sticky Lava, followed by a self double damage skill that gives you an extra turn, followed by your AoE 30 skill, but I really do want you guys to consider how often do you think you're actually going to be using Burning Corruption. And last on skills group 2, we have a skill called Fire Rain. Deals low fire damage to all enemies, requires cooldown. It's an AoE, dealing 25 damage, costing 31 stamina with a 2-turn cooldown. So it's kinda odd seeing this skill in skills group 2, you would normally expect this in skills group 1. And all I have to say about the skill is that the damage output is way too low, so you don't need to even consider running Fire Rain. So from skills group 2, you're gonna want to choose either Flaming Tackle or Burning Corruption, and then you're going to want to choose all of skills group 3, which I will discuss next. In skills group 3, we have an attack called Flame Piercer. Deals very heavy fire damage to a single enemy, dealing 60 damage, costing only 28 stamina and having no cooldown, which is an amazing attack. Like I mentioned earlier, in Team Wars with Metal and Fire, this skill would be phenomenal because even though Timerion hits cooldowns activated on you, you'll still be strong enough to use Flame Piercer and probably take out that Timerion, or probably take out the third monster, whatever it may be. But with this skill, you probably won't be able to take out the fire legendary monster. If this skill would have been special based instead of fire based, it could have been a lot more powerful, but regardless, it's still a very good skill. And next we have Inner Fire. Gives double damage to ally, gains 1 extra turn, requires cooldown. It's a self buff skill that costs 28 stamina and has a 3-turn cooldown, and you basically gain double damage and you gain an extra turn. This is very similar to Barbatos's Blood Covenant attack. In fact, you can kind of consider Shallinar as a Barbatos for fire monsters. Granted, not as powerful as Barbatos, but really, she's the Barbatos of her class. Unlike Barbatos, this skill doesn't give her stamina regeneration, and she also won't be losing 20% of her current life for 2 turns. So this skill right here, Inner Fire, combined with the fact that she has Flame Piercer, combined with the fact that she has Firestorm, which I'll talk about in a bit, this skill makes it so, in my opinion, this monster is the #1 fire monster. She has the amazing speed, she has the amazing stats, she has the amazing skills, she has an amazing trait, she just became the best fire monster. And I really know what you guys think about her. Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? So make sure to comment your opinion below, and let me move on to Firestorm. Firestorm deals low fire damage to all enemies, may burn all targets, requires cooldown. It's an AoE dealing 30 damage, costing 35 stamina with a 3-turn cooldown. So this is your typical fire monster's 30 damage AoE that burns. It would have been really nice if this monster had a 45 damage AoE, but unfortunately she doesn't. Now of course, if this skill would have been special based instead of fire based, it could have been a whole lot better. Because even if you use Inner Fire and then use Firestorm, even with that double damage boost, because it's fire based, you won't be able to take out the enemy fire monster. But with all of that being said, let's discuss potential skill sets for this monster. So I already mentioned that you should run all of skills group 3, and then you should run either Flaming Tackle or Burning Corruption. And again, my main gripe with Burning Corruption is that you essentially need to set up. Your deny monster is going to have to go and deny the enemies from attacking you, then you're going to have to do Burning Corruption, and then on your following turn you're going to do Inner Fire, Firestorm, and yeah, you'll probably deal enough damage to win you the game to wipe out all 3 of the enemy monsters with 1 attack. However, there could be times when it's more beneficial for you to use Inner Fire, give yourself double damage, and then do Flaming Tackle on the enemy fire monster, and that can potentially wipe them out. It's really up to you to think about what do you think is more beneficial. Do you think it's more beneficial to use Burning Corruption, knowing that it requires you to set up, it requires you to somehow be able to deny the enemy for 2 turns, or is it better to run Flaming Tackle, which although has a 45 damage output, because you give yourself double damage, and if you manage to give your monster high enough strength runes, you could be able to take out the enemy fire monster. It's really up to you. Until we're able to calculate actual numbers, I can't say for sure what level the strength runes would need to be to take out your typical fire monster, so I'm just gonna have to leave it at that. But another reason why you might not even need to run Burning Corruption is because of the whole Inner Fire Firestorm combo. So right now my Barbatos has 2 level 4 strength runes and 1 level 6 strength rune, which equals a total of a 138% boost to his power stat. And when he gives himself double damage and then does Hellfire, which is a 35 damage AoE, he dishes about 24k damage. And then the burning takes away 15% of the monster's health. Now Shannara's base power is 44 points weaker than Barbatos, and her Inner Fire does give her double damage, but Firestorm is also 5 points lower than Hellfire, and it's also fire based as opposed to special based. So although you'll get an advantage against nature monsters, you'll get a disadvantage against fire monsters. So unless you have 3 level 6 runes and above on her, she probably won't be able to take out the enemy monsters in 1 hit. For sure, if you have level 8, 9, 10 runes, if you do Inner Fire Firestorm, that's enough to take out any monster that's not fire. But if your runes are lower than that, then it might be more beneficial to actually run Burning Corruption. Again, that's just something I want you guys to consider when choosing between Flaming Tackle and Burning Corruption. So I'm also curious to know, what skills do you guys plan on running? Are you planning on running Flaming Tackle, or are you planning on running Burning Corruption? I already mentioned that I think most people will run Burning Corruption, but I just want to hear you guys' thoughts on these two different skills. And in case you guys didn't catch it already, Shallinar is a fire attacker, meaning she will need strength runes. And you're going to need at least 2 strength runes. I say at least 2 because if you have high level runes, level 10 runes, you can probably get away with using only 2 runes. But if you have lower level runes, you're probably going to need to put all 3 strength runes on her. And if you do have high level runes, then the last rune can be a speed rune or a team speed rune. And that is actually going to conclude my analysis on Shallinar. Thank you everyone who made it to the end of the video. Let me know what you guys thought about it in the comments below. And remember that I had 2 questions for you guys. The first question is, do you agree that she is the new top fire monster? And the second question is, are you going to be running Flaming Tackle or are you going to be running Burning Corruption? So please write your answers in the comments below. Thank you once again to everyone who made it to the end of the video. I hope you guys have a great day or a great night. Remember to dream big and pursue your passions.